Senator James McGrath there in Queensland. Let's go to a Liberal senator now in Hollie Hughes, and we catch up with her after a bit of a workout. I see Hollie catching up with my social media. Now, tell us about the turmoil, really, that's inflicted upon the New South Wales Coalition government. Deputy Premier, Premier, Senior Minister, all flying the coop this week. There's of course, by-elections to come. Dom PERROTTET became Premier today. We have to wait till tomorrow to see who the Nationals choose as their leader and therefore the Deputy Premier of New South Wales. But the outgoing Nationals leader, John Barilaro, has said that the reasons behind his exit will become clearer in coming weeks. Do you know what he's referring to?
I honestly don't, and this might be a bit embarrassing to admit, but I don't think I've actually ever met John Barilaro in person. So I wouldn't hesitate a guess at all as to what may or may not become clearer. Obviously, it's a little bit unsettling, and what happened to Gladys Berejiklian last week, again, we know ICAC's a star chamber. It's guilt by accusation, and these are the things that we need to look at. Dom's been sworn in today as Premier. We'll have a new Deputy Premier tomorrow from the National Party. I don't actually think it's a bad thing that you get a transition as a team together. I think it could actually lead to a much smoother transition. But it was interesting listening to you talk to Senator McGrath earlier around Premier Palaszczuk. I mean, New South Wales is just saying, well, of course, Victoria likes to win everything and, of course, has now got the national record for the highest number of cases in any one day. But prior to today, New South Wales had those significant numbers of cases. And whilst our health system was stretched, it was certainly not at any way near breaking point. The fact that WA and Queensland are now harping on about their hospital systems, we know the ramping is already occurring and they have no COVID in their states. The WA government has spent less than a quarter of what the Commonwealth government's invested in their own state health system. We all remember Anastasia said Queensland hospitals are for Queenslanders. You know, she might want to think back and reflect on that. I think some of the other states are going to have bigger problems going forward than even what's happened in New South Wales.
Yes, we'll keep on top of that issue, but let's stick with Gladys Berejiklian and what's happened with the ICAC really precipitating her departure from politics. And I just want to show you what Andrew Constance, another outgoing minister, he's going to resign and try and get into federal politics. Here's what he had to say about the possibility of Gladys Berejiklian going into federal politics herself.
I think she'd be unreal. You know, you couldn't have a more hard-working, deeply principled, you know, Australian female politician than Gladys Berejiklian.
There you go. Now, you talk about the ICAC and the cloud it puts over someone. She has to deal with all that investigation. There's no way known she could go into federal politics before clearing her name, and there's no way known she could clear her name through the ICAC process before the next federal election. That's part of the problem, isn't it? It just takes so long.
Look, it's absolutely part of the problem, and the ICAC has said that the hearings are likely to go for, you know, at most 10 days. The problem with ICAC, though, is they sometimes don't report for 3, 4, 5 years. They keep people's lives under a cloud for such a prolonged period of time. It's absolutely inexcusable the way that they delay their actual reports. And it's not alone. ICAC in South Australia, they saw the suicide of a policeman who'd been under investigation. And incredibly sadly, the report clearing him was dated 8 days prior to his suicide. So they found out in South Australia that the commission down there was holding on to reports. And through their inquiries, the wife of that policeman actually said, you know, had he been cleared, she was pretty confident he'd still be here today. And this is the kind of star chamber public prosecution when we see such a minute number of cases being heard through ICAC ever being referred to the DPP, but people are assumed to be guilty. People are assumed to have to step aside. Careers and lives are ruined, while ICAC takes its sweet time to deliver. I think Gladys would be amazing. I've certainly heard from people in the Warringah conference that would love to see her run there. But the odds of ICAC actually doing its job quickly and expeditiously, I think, is highly unlikely.
Yep, she'd be perfect. If all that got wrapped up and she was cleared, Gladys versus Zali in Warringah would be ideal, be good for the state, good for the country. but because of the ICAC, it just won't happen, I wouldn't have thought. Thanks for joining us, Senator.
Thanks, Chris.